A small habit can tighten its grip on your confidence without leaving any clear mark, almost like a quiet draft sneaking through a closed window. Most people never notice it happening because the routine feels ordinary, familiar, and harmless. Yet something in that routine may be steadily reshaping how you judge your own abilities. The big question sits right in the center of this mystery. Could a simple daily behavior be eroding the way you see yourself without you realizing it? And if so, how do we even begin to measure something as subtle as a shrinking sense of confidence? We start with the observation that confidence rarely collapses in one dramatic moment. It fades in small shifts, much like colors losing intensity after months of sunlight. Each shift is tiny, nearly invisible, until one day the change becomes impossible to ignore. This idea raises a natural curiosity. If confidence can be worn down gradually, what else might follow the same slow pattern of decline? Confidence is shaped by the environment we move through every day, and much of that environment is built from habits we no longer question. People across different ages and countries report feeling less certain about their decisions today than a decade ago. This pattern appears in classrooms, offices, and even casual social settings, where small routines quietly influence how individuals evaluate themselves. The modern world gives us more choices and information than most of human history ever allowed. In the past, daily life revolved around predictable tasks in familiar places, which created a stable rhythm. Now many routines take place on glowing screens, in shifting digital spaces, where comparison is constant and feedback arrives faster than our minds can process. This shift has changed how people track progress and judge their personal worth. Historical records show that earlier societies placed more emphasis on communal roles, where confidence came from contributing to a group's shared needs. Today, confidence often grows from private performance, personal milestones, and individual visibility. This difference matters because habits that once carried little emotional weight now have the power to influence our self-belief more directly. Why does this context matter now? Because the more attention we give to tiny, repeated behaviors, the more they shape our sense of competence. A habit that seems neutral on the surface might quietly steer a person toward doubt without any dramatic event signaling the change. What clues does this give us about where confidence rises or falls in everyday life? Imagine confidence as a houseplant on a windowsill. If it gets the right light and water, it grows in small, steady steps. If something blocks the light, the plant does not collapse in an instant. It simply leans, weakens, and adjusts itself without making a sound. This analogy helps us understand the kind of habit that might be damaging confidence. It is not usually the dramatic, obvious behavior. It is the subtle, repetitive one that shifts how the mind evaluates itself. Psychologists often refer to this process as a feedback loop, a pattern where one action influences the next in a continuous cycle. A feedback loop, in simple terms, is like a hallway of mirrors. Each reflection slightly alters the next, and over time, the image drifts from the original. In technical terms, a feedback loop is a sequence in which the output of a behavior or thought becomes the input for the next round of evaluation. When this loop repeats many times, even small distortions can accumulate into meaningful changes. The mechanism at the center of this topic works through attention. Attention functions a bit like a spotlight at a theater performance. Where the light falls, the audience looks, and what the audience looks at becomes the story. In psychological language, attention refers to the cognitive process that selects certain information while filtering out the rest. If a habit directs this spotlight toward moments of hesitation rather than moments of competence, the loop begins to form. Each small instance of doubt becomes more noticeable than successes of equal size. Over time, the mind starts treating these selected moments as more representative than they truly are. Why does the mind favor certain moments over others? Because attention, by design, tends to highlight anything that feels uncertain, unfamiliar, or incomplete. This protective pattern helps us learn and adapt, yet it can also distort how we evaluate our overall abilities. When a habit repeatedly nudges attention towards self-criticism, the mechanism activates. The mind begins to overlearn doubt and underlearn capability. The result is a gradual shift in confidence that feels natural even though it is not fully grounded in reality. The first observation comes from a series of self-report studies where participants tracked their daily habits and rated their confidence levels. Across multiple studies involving around 1,200 adults, those who frequently engaged in negative self-talk reported confidence levels roughly 15 to 20% lower than their peers. This suggests a measurable association between this internal habit and self-perceived ability, though it does not yet prove causation. A second piece of evidence comes from laboratory experiments using a simple task. Participants were asked to solve puzzles under varying conditions of encouragement. Those exposed to critical inner dialogue, simulated by prompting negative thoughts aloud, took 20 to 30% longer to complete the task. This indicates that negative self-talk may slow performance by increasing cognitive load, the mental effort required to focus on a task. Third, longitudinal surveys conducted over 6 months monitored changes in confidence among college students. Students who reported habitual self-criticism showed a subtle but consistent decline in their academic self-confidence, compared with a control group whose self-talk was neutral or positive. This hints that the effect might accumulate over time, like a small leak gradually lowering the water level in a tank. Neuroscientific evidence adds another layer. Functional MRI scans reveal increased activation in the anterior cingulate cortex when individuals engage in self-critical thought. This region is associated with error detection and emotional regulation, suggesting that habitual self-criticism might heighten sensitivity to perceived mistakes. In practical terms, this means your brain is effectively keeping a running tally of every moment it believes you have failed. Finally, cross-cultural surveys indicate that the habit of self-criticism exists in varying degrees worldwide. In some societies, moderate self-criticism correlates with motivation and careful performance, while excessive self-criticism aligns with lower confidence and higher stress levels. This observation highlights that context and cultural norms influence how the habit affects individual confidence. Taken together, these data points suggest a connection between persistent self-critical thinking and diminished confidence, yet the relationship is nuanced and dependent on frequency, intensity, and context. While each piece of evidence reinforces the hypothesis, none alone definitively proves that this habit destroys confidence outright. The story is clear enough to warrant attention, but subtle enough to require careful interpretation. This indicates that negative self-talk may slow performance by increasing cognitive load, the mental effort required to focus on a task. Third, longitudinal surveys conducted over 6 months monitored changes in confidence among college students. Students who reported habitual self-criticism showed a subtle but consistent decline in their academic self-confidence, compared with a control group whose self-talk was neutral or positive. This hints that the effect might accumulate over time, like a small leak gradually lowering the water level in a tank. Neuroscientific evidence adds another layer. Functional MRI scans reveal increased activation in the anterior cingulate cortex when individuals engage in self-critical thought. This region is associated with error detection and emotional regulation, suggesting that habitual self-criticism might heighten sensitivity to perceived mistakes. In practical terms, this means your brain is effectively keeping a running tally of every moment it believes you have failed. Finally, cross-cultural surveys indicate that the habit of self-criticism exists in varying degrees worldwide. In some societies, moderate self-criticism correlates with motivation and careful performance, while excessive self-criticism aligns with lower confidence and higher stress levels. This observation highlights that context and cultural norms influence how the habit affects individual confidence. Taken together, these data points suggest a connection between persistent self-critical thinking and diminished confidence, yet the relationship is nuanced and dependent on frequency, intensity, and context. While each piece of evidence reinforces the hypothesis, none alone definitively proves that this habit destroys confidence outright. The story is clear enough to warrant attention, but subtle enough to require careful interpretation. The null hypothesis in this context is straightforward. Frequent self-critical thoughts do not directly lower confidence. Any observed correlation might instead result from unrelated factors such as personality traits, past experiences, or situational stress. One alternative explanation is that low confidence causes self-criticism rather than the other way around. For example, individuals who have previously failed or faced repeated criticism may naturally internalize these experiences, producing negative self-talk. In this scenario, the habit is a symptom, not a cause, and interventions targeting self-talk alone may have limited effect. Another possibility involves environmental and social factors. High-pressure workplaces or competitive academic settings can amplify both self-critical thoughts and confidence fluctuations. Here, the observed association may reflect the surrounding context more than an intrinsic psychological mechanism. Cognitive style offers a third angle. Some people naturally engage in analytical, detail-oriented thinking, which includes evaluating personal performance critically. While this habit might resemble self-criticism, it can also coexist with stable confidence if the individual maintains balanced self-assessment. Current evidence suggests that habitual self-criticism likely contributes to lowered confidence in many cases, but it interacts with personality, context, and prior experiences. Based on available data, the explanation most consistent with the findings is that negative self-talk can erode confidence incrementally, though it is neither the sole cause nor universally destructive. Understanding this interplay helps frame interventions more effectively and prevents oversimplified conclusions. Despite the observations, significant gaps remain in our understanding of how self-critical habits affect confidence. Most studies rely on self-reported data, which can be biased by memory, mood, or social desirability, making it difficult to measure actual cognitive patterns accurately. Laboratory experiments, while controlled, often use artificial tasks that may not reflect real-world challenges. Solving puzzles under prompted negative thoughts is not the same as navigating complex social or professional environments, so the ecological validity of these studies is limited. Neuroscientific measures such as fMRI offer insight into brain activity, but they cannot fully capture the nuanced, moment-to-moment effects of self-criticism in daily life. Scans are also expensive and typically include small sample sizes, reducing generalizability to broader populations. Longitudinal studies provide clues about cumulative effects, yet 6 months or even a year may not be long enough to observe long-term consequences. We do not know whether these patterns persist over decades or how life events, relationships, or interventions might alter trajectories. To close these gaps, researchers could combine large-scale, real-world monitoring with advanced neuroimaging and ecological momentary assessment. Tracking participants' thoughts continuously through wearable devices or apps, while correlating with behavioral outcomes, could clarify causality and individual variation. Until such studies are conducted, conclusions must remain cautious, acknowledging both the potential impact and the limitations of current evidence. If habitual self-criticism truly undermines confidence, the implications extend beyond individual psychology. In education, students who consistently engage in negative self-talk may hesitate to take on challenging tasks, slowing learning and reducing academic achievement compared with peers. This could affect long-term career trajectories, particularly in fields that demand resilience and risk-taking. In the workplace, employees who internalize self-critical habits might struggle with decision-making or innovation. Even minor delays or second-guessing can accumulate, lowering productivity and team efficiency. Compared with colleagues who maintain balanced self-assessment, the difference could represent several hours of lost work per week across an organization. On a societal scale, widespread self-critical tendencies could subtly influence mental health statistics. Higher rates of anxiety, stress, and burnout may emerge in communities where self-criticism is culturally reinforced, creating a feedback loop that diminishes overall confidence. However, it is equally important to recognize that moderate self-criticism can promote careful planning and thoughtful evaluation, suggesting that context and degree are critical. Risks arise when this habit is oversimplified or sensationalized. Labeling self-criticism as universally harmful could discourage reflective thinking, while ignoring its potential benefits might prevent targeted interventions for those most affected. Practical approaches require nuanced understanding and mindful application, balancing caution with opportunities for growth. The evidence suggests that habitual self-critical thinking can subtly erode confidence over time, yet it is neither the only factor nor an inevitable outcome. Its effects appear to accumulate gradually, influenced by personality, context, and prior experiences, making the relationship complex and individualized. The excitement is real, but so is the need for caution. Could small shifts in how we speak to ourselves unlock greater confidence and resilience in everyday life? If you found this topic intriguing, Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments.